This is David Bedein, behind the scene with David Bedein. I'm calling you from Jerusalem, speaking to the world, speaking to the Middle East, speaking to my family, trying to say exactly what's going on, explain exactly what's going on in the Middle East right now, which are going through amazing times. The President of the United States, who also wears a red tie, he went to Washington. In Washington, he brought the Prime Minister of Israel and his staff and different leaders to come and speak with him about his Middle East plan of the century. Now, on the one hand, if you read the plan, as I put it on my website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, it's a very pro-Arab plan in every possible way. It gives the Arabs exactly what they've been looking for in terms of recognition, in terms of money, in terms of status. And basically, what he did was the ultimate situation of giving a person enough rope to hang himself with. Because what President Trump did was to say, I'm going to give you $50 billion of development funds and develop your schools, develop everything you want that you could possibly ever dream of for an independent Palestinian Arab state. Was what we're watching happen is something else completely. And this is the story of what I'm about to tell you. Despite the fact that the President of the United States, with the backing of Saudi Arabia, the most influential Arab country, offered an independent entity to the Palestinian Arab people through the Palestinian Liberation Organization. What happened? They rejected it. They said they don't want to see it. And that is the story. It's the bottom story of what's coming out of the Middle East today. That a war, not a conflict, but a war, which has been going on for 70 years, all of a sudden has a resolution to that war, and that's not something people are expecting. People are expecting the war to go on. People are expecting that the Palestine Liberation Organization will continue to kill, will continue to have every possible school book. You know what we do in our agency with a group called the Israel Resource News Agency and the Center for Near East Policy Research. They put out school books like this one here, which came out 3 weeks ago. What is that? That's a woman named Dalal al-Mughrabi, who murdered 38 Jews on a bus in 1978, 13 children, and 25 adults, after landing her little boat from Lebanon on a beach north in Tel Aviv, murdering an American photographer and coming south and grabbing a bus and killing people. And she's described in the school book, a brand new school book, as the perfect role model for Palestinian children. Now, I wouldn't believe it, except this is the direction things are going in over here. What President Trump decided to do was to grab the initiative, to take the initiative, and to do something and to say, look, we're going to give you an alternative to war. We're going to give you an alternative to the waste of time that you put all your energy, the Arabs have put all their energies in for all these 70 years, and offer them a well-financed, well-organized, well-oiled, and that's, of course, the hint of Saudi Arabia, well-oiled proposal to basically show an Arab entity that will make peace. If they make peace, you can make money from it. And he's a businessman, and that's what he offered. It's not surprising for those of us who follow the Middle East that the Arab leadership rejected it. The PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, rejected it out of hand and started organizing riots. And the prediction is that those riots are going to get pretty violent over the next few days. And those riots are going to be the story. But behind the story is why they are demonstrating. This sounds like something totally counterintuitive, something out of the Marx Brothers, something out of Charlie Chaplin, something out of Mad Magazine. It's not something that people expect. People expect that if you're given a good thing, even if it's what they call in the Middle East not really a bribe, but a gratuity. Let's say call it a gratuity. An incentive, bakshish is the word they use in Arabic, and you offer such an incentive of $50 billion, you're going to put aside this obsession of the war with the Jews. But this is not something the PLO is willing to do. Instead, the Palestine Liberation Organization just issued a whole series of new textbooks in our agency. The Center for Near East Policy Research got all the school books, got them translated, and we discovered that the A war for the right, what they call the right of return to places they came from in 1948, became the focus. But not only the right of return, but the right of return by force of arms. Now, this obsession of a war with a very silly purpose, just I'm going to take back homes that I lost in '48. That's just totally ridiculous. But that obsession is what President Trump tried to counter in the last few days. And it looks to me, even though I didn't want to believe it at the beginning, that it's starting to work. Because what's starting to happen is we have these. The world media is watching. The world media, the diplomats around the world are watching. Israel, which has today 9 million residents, and when I moved to Israel, it had 3 million residents. We're a dynamic country, and it's a dynamic country that responds well, boiling in a positive way. There is a dynamic here in Israel of things happening all the time, of prosperity happening, of new people coming here all the time, of Jewish people coming from around the world, and what we're seeing here is something opposite than the instinct for killing, the instinct for battle, the instinct for war, and that's what we're seeing occur as this takes place. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu had this long meeting with President Trump. He brought in 12 mayors from the outlying areas near Jerusalem, which basically would be under siege in case the PLO decided to put it under siege, because they're spread amongst Arab villages. They gave their blessing to this program because they understand that the Arab leadership, doesn't want to see it happen, because the Arab leadership has benefited all these years, or has gotten used to all these years, having a war go on and having themselves benefit from that war. And that's one of the problems we face these days. That we don't know how it is that people get along with such a violent culture, but that's the way it is. So I can tell you that this is we're watching, those of us who live here and didn't go on an airplane to follow what happened. We were able to, in our armchair existence, to follow what's going on and demonstrate deep interest. Now, the one aspect of the Middle East which did not join in the celebrations of what happened was, of course, Iran. Now, Iran is putting itself on the other side and hoping. And I've spoken with Iranian people, hoping to form an alliance of the disparate factions amongst the Arabs. And the fact that Iran is at war with America, and America wants to be at war with Israel, so the enemy of my enemy can be my friend. And that's what's happened all of a sudden overnight with Saudi Arabia, establishing an interest office, and establishing a program for investments. Now, that doesn't mean that they love Israel. It's just they see it as utilitarian, to get along with Israel. And by the way, these school books which you put out, part of the reasons that you see the school books in such a mess is because the Saudis, in their final year as the, in a sense, titular head of the Arab League, they made sure that they would back up this system. President Trump has played it in a very low-key, serious manner, allowing this to take place, encouraging the Arabs and Jews to talk, encouraging them to develop joint business ventures. And that's one way to co-opt the situation. So those are my thoughts behind the scene with David Bedein. There is some pressure to bring in school books, which I call the weapons of mass instruction. That school books which are dangerous, which cause not only bad feelings but inspire people to violence. The weapons of mass instruction is what Israel has to face in the near future. But I think there's enough countries that identify with Israel on that note, that Israel is no longer going to be considered an isolated nation. So the lack of isolation, which we felt in the last few days, the lack of isolation is the big story. The election in Israel is a very confused situation. It's the third election in a year, and no one has gotten a majority yet. Netanyahu, who has been in his position for 10 years now, may just get reelected as a result of everything that's just happened, even though he's been indicted for things that generally you wouldn't get indicted for in any other country. His connections with the media, where he was asking the media for favors, that's usually not a charge of something you could be charged on for anything. But what the people of Israel are responding to is the same thing they're responding to in the United States: the growth, the economic, the economic power that the purchase that the person who purchases any consumer products feels these days. I've been in Israel for almost 50 years, and I remember the days when we would plead with our parents for tuna fish, peanut butter, nice coffee, nice toilet paper. Things are not like that now, and the extent to which you see a prospering economy, as that's the story over here, and that is what will, more than anything else, in my opinion, throw the election one way and not the other. I'm often asked, how do people in isolated Jewish communities, also known as settlements, feel about the peace plan? Those people who know what's really going on know that the Arabs who live in Arab refugee camps and who dominate the population in Gaza and in Judea, Samaria, also known as West Bank, their aim is not to attack the Jews who live in the nearby what's called settlements, but rather the Jews who live in communities that were Arab villages in 48. The focus of geography lessons in the Palestinian Authority is to understand where you came from in 48 and where you're going back to. And that is what the most people in the Jewish communities in Judea Samaria are paying attention to. If they were only focusing on getting back places they left in 67, they might achieve that, but that's not what they're talking about. The people who live in Judea Samaria, in what's called the settlements, reserve judgment. They know very well, because they know the Arabs who live near them, that the Arabs who live nearby are not the people who want to take over their communities, but rather it's the people who came over with the PLO from Tunisia, and the people who just see that the more economic development there is in these communities, the more they might get some of the booty at the end of the war. So there really is no, I have not discerned it because I travel around a lot, besides the fact that I live in one of these settlements in Efrat. I haven't seen and discerned any popular protest or popular anger over the situation. So therefore, it's a non-starter in terms of a subject for discussion. I want to address another issue, which is tourism to Israel. Tourism to Israel has burgeoned in a way that it never burgeoned before. We have as many as 4 million tourists in a nation of 9 million people. That's pretty good. And the words, diplomatic words, where people are just talking and that kind of thing, that doesn't affect anyone's decision whether or not to come and visit Israel. What would affect it is if there would be a violent campaign on the other side. Unfortunately, that's what we expect, and when that happens, we'll see how many people are true to their ideologies of not allowing this to affect them. Another issue I want to discuss is, why is it that Abbas, in a biblical sense, his heart has been turned hard? In other words, so that he doesn't even listen to any positive things that he's supposed to listen to. They're stuck in two things. One, that they should control Jerusalem, all of Jerusalem, and two, that they should return to where they came from in 1948. And that's what they're stuck in. It's an ideology which has proven to be profitable. They've been able to galvanize the support from the Arab world on this. Now, here's the surprise, and this is the newsworthy moment of this conversation. In a sense, the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, for the first time is isolated in the Arab world who don't want to hear their cries. They're tired of it. They really feel it's not going and not serving the interests of the Arab world in any way, shape, or form, and therefore they're going in another direction of finding a way to reconcile themselves with Israel. So that's a very, very big difference of what's happening here. You can't get people excited over a mimeo machine, what we used to call mimeo machines, where you print out what you're supposed to say and that kind of thing. I'll never forget the day I covered Yasser Arafat's funeral, and before he came in, there was no response out there at all. So some people came from the treasury of the Palestine Liberation Organization, offered 10 shekel coins to boys to give out his picture and act like they were sad. The problem is orchestrating something which the Arabs don't care about. The Arabs do not. The Arab street doesn't care about. The Arab media cares about it, yes, but the Arab street doesn't care. There are many funny moments in covering the situation over here. of world leaders and Arab leaders who try to say they have great following. But when you have a great following, you got to control your cameramen. And there, Abbas addressed a big rally, and his cameraman, instead of focusing on him, focused on the empty seats in the audience, and showed that half the here is a very well publicized public event with signs all over Jerusalem that he was going to speak. And guess what? People didn't show up. And that's just a big sign of what's going on here. A man who pretends to have a great following actually has no following whatsoever, and the following he has, it's contrived. And by the way, I'm going to give you another newsworthy piece, which in a future program of Behind the Scene with for David Bedein we may do. I was able to ask a top legal authority: Is does Abbas have immunity from prosecution in case he's involved with major crimes? The answer is no. So some people whose loved ones were murdered, and he gave a gratuity to the loved ones, are now beginning a legal case against him. Legal criminal case. Israel, something that people don't know, has the death penalty for one crime. That's for genocide advocacy. And the last time it was, of course, invoked was with Adolf Eichmann. And you remember what happened to Adolf Eichmann. You might say all the noose that's fit to print. He was hanged. And that may happen, believe it or not, with Abbas, because people whom he paid to murder their children are now about to take a major legal action against him. Stay tuned, because in a future program, Behind the Scene with David Bedein, I'll expose that to you. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and perhaps you can be in touch, give me some feedback. My website is israelbehindthenews.com, and you'll see our email on that on that site. Thank you. Okay.